Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle Community Webinar Series. Today, we'll be going through all of the new enhancements and features that are available in our latest NG Firewall version 14.1 release. My name is Shannon Bonfiglio, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Untangle. I'll be your host today. I also have with us Dirk Morris, our founder and Chief Product Officer, who will be going through our changelog and give a demonstration of all of the new features. As well as a few staff members on hand to help answer any questions that you may have. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Please be sure you're selecting the correct audio preference on the right-hand side. You will see the option to use a telephone or your computer speakers. If you do select to use a telephone, you will need to use the access code provided. As always, questions will be answered throughout this, so if you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box on the right-hand side, and we will attempt to get to all of those throughout this demonstration. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch or revisit this or share it with anyone you wish. The webinar will be posted on the Untangle YouTube channel within 24 hours after this has ended, and any of those that have registered will receive the link. And with that, I will pass it over to Dirk.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Really excited to show off some of the new features in 14.1. And since I always forget, I'm going to address this first this time, which is the most common question: when am I going to get the 14.1 upgrade? The 14.1 upgrade is already rolling to the entire population, so it's not available to everybody yet, but it probably will be in the next couple weeks. So if you don't see it now, don't panic. That's totally normal. You'll probably see it within a couple weeks. If you have auto upgrade on, it'll just automatically upgrade. The automatic upgrade is pretty quick. There's no reboot or anything. There's no network downtime. So it'll probably just happen if you have auto upgrade on without you even noticing. As always, please type questions into the question box, and I'll pause every now and then and try to go over it and try to cover the stuff that we can. If not, we're always available on the forums. So jump on there and ask your questions, and we'll be hanging out there for the rest of the day. I will be going through the changes. You can always, on your own, let me switch over to my browser real quick, go to wiki.untangle.com and go down here to change logs and click on the 14.1 change log. This describes most of the major changes. There's obviously tons and tons of minor changes that we make every day that aren't in here, but this includes most of the major stuff that's changed that affects you as a user of 14.1. So I'll go through this today, but you can go through and follow this on your own later. It's also described at untangle.com on the 14.1 release page. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump in. We had a lot of feedback over the last couple of years about intrusion prevention. So we're very excited to have a new implementation of intrusion prevention. Intrusion prevention is a tricky technology for Untangle specifically because we are really focused on ease of use and keeping things simple. And most users that use Untangle really want to control and secure their networks, but don't want to be in there every single day fixing and tinkering with things. Most people use it as kind of a set it and forget it for the most part technology. And intrusion prevention by its nature is not very simple and easy to manage. It's a very hands-on technology. If you want to get value out of it, you have to really configure it sometimes on a daily basis. So this has always been a very struggle for us because it's the technology itself doesn't really mesh with our philosophy. So we've tried to make another attempt at it to really maintain the value of intrusion prevention without making it a huge headache to maintain on a daily basis. So the way we've done that, and I'll show this in just a second, is now we've separated this concept. Previously there was signatures, and you had this huge signature set, and those signatures come from upstream. Today they come from a group called Emerging Threats, and those signatures you could go in and turn on and off. And you had to basically monitor your logs and go in and turn certain signatures on and off. A lot of people said, well, I want to turn on signatures en masse, and we said, well, that's really dangerous, and we had this whole back and forth about the difficulty of maintaining a big signature set. So what we've done now is created two different concepts. There's signatures, which is what comes from Emerging Threats, and that could be like a signature that says, I'm looking for attack XYZ. And then there are rules, and the rules determine which signatures are enabled and not enabled. So let me just switch over to a live server real quick. go into intrusion prevention. And now you'll see a couple new tabs, rules and signatures. So if I click on signatures, this is what comes from upstream. Let me just scroll down and look at a couple. So these signatures all come from emerging threats. And under the recommended action is the recommended action according to emerging threats. So this is not something that we recommended. This comes from upstream. So they have all these different signatures, and some of them are set to log, and some of them are set to disable. And emerging threats today, and actually most signature providers, all signature providers, none of them recommend block by default. They leave that all up to the user. But many of them are turned on and off. Now you may say, well, why is this not turned on? That could be a lot of reasons. It could be an expensive signature, or more likely it's just very old and not currently seen in the wild. So they changed these recommendations upstream, and then when they push out new versions, it will change the recommendation here. What's new is this new rule action, which basically means what the action of this on the signature, meaning the status of it after the rules are evaluated. So the rules are over here, and rules basically are, most rules on Untangle run against events or sessions or things like that. Like firewall rules evaluate sessions, saying, should I pass or block this session? These rules evaluate against signatures, and basically a rule set determines which signatures are enabled. So you can craft your rule set to say, I want to be very aggressive and I want to turn on things that are related to MySQL server, and I want to do this and that. And essentially it will maintain the signature set, turning on and off different things, new rules that show up and things like that automatically on your behalf. So the thinking is you go in here and you tune this. And by default, let me show you move this out of the way. This is what it would look like by default. So these two rules I added. These rules would be in here, and basically what it's saying is I want to, if I have more than 1 gig of memory, turn on these class types. So if I went back in the signatures, I could see those class types. If I have more than 1.5 gigs, turn on these. If I have more than 2 gigs, turn on these to the recommended action. Let me show you what a rule looks like on the inside. So essentially rules describe what signatures. So you can say if it matches against this protocol, or if it's a very specific signature, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I want to turn it on to log, or I want to set it to block if it was already recommended as log from the upstream provider, which is the most common one if you want to enable block. There's also just enable block no matter what. So I want to enable block no matter what the recommended action was from emerging threats, or I want to disable the rule. So you can craft rules for all sorts of different things using these, saying I want to do these, for all those. Let me get rid of that. I want to use the recommended action. So you can go in here and craft your rule set. These 3 are on by default. These 3 are ones that commonly are requested, although be careful. Basically what this is, it says if critical priority, then it will turn on block for any rule that was recommended to be on from emerging threats if it's a critical priority, which is the definition provided from upstream. So down here at the bottom, you can say signatures affected. With this current existing rule set, let me refresh because I don't actually want to delete those 2 rules. So with this existing rule set down here at the bottom, it shows you how many signatures are currently enabled or not enabled. And that would be, currently I have 18,000 set to log, 200 set to block, and 7,000 set to enable or disabled. And if I change this, you could see those change in real time. It's going to actually reevaluate what that would do and adjust those numbers. All right, variables is basically the same. The variables are how the intrusion prevention engine evaluates these different signatures. For the most part, you can leave these defined as is, but you can go here and tune these if you want. And on the status page, we've also added some nice things, some general statistics, but also memory usage. Memory usage is the big issue with IPS because it takes a lot more memory than a lot of different technologies. And so people with 2 gigs of memory, which is really fine to basically run everything, except intrusion prevention, will turn on intrusion prevention and say, well, now I need 4 gigs of memory. So we've tried to make this call out to show how much the intrusion prevention engine is using. So this is 253 megabytes approximately. This graph shows of the total memory in the device, which this one has 16 gigs, it's using basically very little. 1% of the server's memory usage is used by intrusion prevention currently. And that depends greatly on what signature set you enable. So the hope is for people who really want to enable signatures en masse and things, they can come in here and create rules, create great rule sets. You can export that rule set and save it. Signatures are no longer stored in the settings, which means the settings are much smaller, which makes the backups much smaller of Untangle. So now you can manage these through Command Center to say, here's my standard IPS rule set, and I want to push that to all these boxes. So hopefully this approach will make your life a lot easier in terms of enabling and managing your signature set. Let me go over questions real quick because I know IPS is a hot topic. I'm going to show reports here in a second. There were a couple of questions about that. There are a couple of rules, they're not on by default, that do block things. So you can go in here and say, you know, I want to block all critical priority rules that were already set to logged at least. And that would block rules, but it's not done by default. Again, emerging threats does not suggest any rules, recommend any rules set to block by default. Neither do we, but you are of course free to do that. Let me show reports real quick. No, I don't want to save any of that. So this is all very similar reports as we've always had in intrusion prevention, showing rules that are logged and blocked. Let me just actually just show the detected events themselves. So this is a big list of everything that's seen on this network, and you can see it's finding a lot of stuff. So this is just the last 2 minutes, this page. So to really get the most value out of intrusion prevention, you need to go in here and review this stuff. Is there anything that I care about? Is this just noise? Is there something that I should set to block here? So looking at these things really quick, you know, this is not a big deal. You would definitely not want to block this. A lot of these are just info. In other words, that like, hey, something that may be of interest to you is happening on your network. Some of this stuff is a little more iffy. This is a potential SSH scan. Maybe that person was just looking at port SSH a lot. So you can go in here, but we've also added a way to easily block right here from the event log. So let's say, let me find something that I actually might want to block. This is all just looking for mostly, it's like just information attempts. So let me see the poor reputation. That's just an IP blacklist. Well, let's say we wanted to block everybody that had a poor reputation in the IP group 78. I could click this, and essentially that's going to add that rule. And I'm going to open another window while that's going, hopefully. And I'm going to look at the rule set while that's reloading. Saving intrusion prevention settings can take a little bit. You have to be patient. That's because the signature set, which is actually downloaded into the UI so that you can view it, is actually quite large, huge. You know, talking tens of thousands of signatures. So now at the top of my rule set, since I hit that block thing, you'll see a rule that says turn on the rule that I clicked on, or the event that I clicked on, signature, this group identifier, this, set it to block if enabled. So now that rule will be set to blocked. And if I went in here and found it, which I should show how to search, that would be an easy way to enable an individual signature. We've also added a nice way to search through signatures. So let's run through a use case. Actually, this is a perfect use case. So this network has a WordPress based web server on it. WordPress is a very common web server, web infrastructure that gets attacked a lot. So if I search for message contains WordPress, I'm going to see a whole bunch of signatures that say WordPress in the message, which is a good way to get signatures related to WordPress. But you can apply this for anything. I mean, you can search all sorts of different ways, all sorts of different things. Let's say I run an MS SQL server. So now I'm finding attempted recon, what Trojan, let me see, shellcode. This is the better one. So here's an MS SQL shellcode attempt, which is turned on by default to log. So let's say I want to now create a rule that matches all these things that I see. I can click create rule. And what that's going to do is create a rule that says message contains MS SQL, which applies to all those signatures I was just looking at. Let me say I want to block those if they're already enabled. Click done. It's going to put it at the bottom, just like all rules in Untangle. It puts it at the bottom. You need to adjust where you want it to go. All rules are run in order on signatures. So I almost certainly want it to be up toward the top somewhere. So I'm going to put it right there. Oops. Right there. And then I'm going to click save. And that's going to rerun this rule set on the signatures. When that's done, it's going to download the new signatures. And if I went back and checked in signatures tab, which I'll do in a minute when this is done, reloading the entire engine and reloading the signatures, you'll now see that those MS SQL rules are set to block. While that's running, I'm going to read some questions real quick. Signatures are definitionally just, they're kind of like snippets of either regular expressions or different types of rules that match traffic, that you use them to detect attacks, so to speak. So they're kind of written after the fact to say, we know about this. If you see a packet that contains 1, 2, 3, XYZ, and it's going to this port, that's pretty suspicious. There was a question about active threat is the active threat poor reputation, which is basically a fancy kind of IP reputation blacklist, not worth blocking by default. Not from emerging threats. The recommendation is to log it. If you want to go in there and set it to block, you can easily just search for all things that say, I want to write a rule that says poor reputation. Oops, I did not mean to click on that. And I want to set all those rules to block. You can totally do that. It's not something they recommend. It's not something we recommend, but you can do it. Is it safe to do it? Probably, but you may need to be aware that, when you start turning on a lot of block signatures, you may have problems. And when somebody comes to you on, Tuesday morning and is totally upset and says, oh my God, what's going on? I can't get to XYZ. You need to think, wait a minute, I need to go in and log in, turn off IPS and see if it's affected, because maybe it's one of those signatures that I turned on. All these signatures definitely have false positives, so just be aware. So you could easily create a rule to turn on all these by saying create rule. I want to set them all to block. I'm not going to do this just because I'm not totally comfortable with that on this network. And then I drag it up here. But what I was showing was MS SQL. What were we looking at? We were looking at the Trojan ones, or the shellcode ones. So here you can see I created that rule that said MS SQL. If it contains that, I want to enable. So this was recommended to be logged, and now it's set to block based on my rule set. Intrusion prevention does scan both inbound and outbound. Also, one thing to be aware of, it also scans traffic from the internet that may not go anywhere. In other words, let's say you don't have any port forwards, just none. Traffic from the internet, a new session from the internet, is basically going to go nowhere because it's just going to hit your external IP, and Untangle's going to say, I don't have any port forwards, and it's going to be dropped. IPS still scans that traffic, which means you get a lot of information in the logs that I've been attacked. Well, yes, you have. Technically, that traffic got dropped immediately after, even though intrusion prevention just logged it. Because by its nature, it's inbound and it's going to be blocked because NAT is there and there's no port forwards. So there's a lot of noise in the reports that may sound alarming, but it's actually not at all relevant because that traffic is being blocked. And now we did that because that's the way people prefer it. They'd rather see more information saying this IP scanned all these ports. They did a port scan. The flip side is the other option is you don't scan any of that, but then you almost scan zero traffic inbound. So you would not see that port scan. You would not see that SSH attempt and things like that. Class type and category and all that is definitions from emerging threats. So you can go look at their signature set and what they mean by class type and category and all those terms. Those terms come from upstream. If you're the kind of person that doesn't want to deal with any of this, we would recommend, depending on your system and your network, either just leaving intrusion prevention on or turning it on with the default rule set and then going in here occasionally and looking at the reports. I would not recommend turning on rules en masse, especially to block, unless you're prepared to just spend some time tuning it. But if you want to get the most value out of IPS, that's what you need to do. This is a funny comment. I'm gonna read this one out loud because this is the nature of IPS. The gentleman who's doing this webinar knew for sure that there's one item he definitely didn't want to block, but I have no reference to know if he's right or not. That applies to every single signature in the entire rule set, all 25,000 of them. Keep in mind, emerging threats recommends a lot of them be off entirely, and a lot of them to be logged, and absolutely zero of them to be blocked. And before you say, well, that's just emerging threat, VRT does exactly the same thing. Ultimately, what you decide is up to you. My recommendation would be, if you have a small server, leave IPS off entirely. For the memory and CPU that it uses, it provides a lot of noise and very little security value compared to a lot of the other security technologies we have. If you have a very big server, you can turn it on with the defaults. That'd be my recommendation. You got plenty of memory, no big deal. It's not going to cost you anything. You're not going to get a lot of value out of it unless you go in here and look at the reports. But ultimately, it comes down to doing the research and understanding it. That's the nature of the beast. We're just trying to make it easier for you to manage your signature set. Are there signatures that help people not port forwarding or anything? Well, if you're not port forwarding anything, or a lot of people don't, unless you have public servers on site, you don't. You're blocking everything inbound by default. So all the attacks, so to speak, from the internet that are initiated from the internet, in other words, inbound sessions, are blocked by their nature. So you're going to get a lot of noise in here about all those attacks. It's still scanning the outbound sessions though. So if I initiate a HTTP access to some site and it tries something malicious in response to what I've done, so I clicked on a bad ad or something like that, IPS is still scanning those packets. So it does provide value even though if you don't have any port forwards. It's scanning outbound sessions. Often the attack is initiated from inside. So I visited a malicious website, or I did XYZ, or the user got me to do something. So it does still provide value in those contexts. And here you can see source address, destination address. So these are inbound. All these are inbound. These are these are literally just, somebody tried to ping me, which is not very interesting at all. I should probably disable that. It's not a very interesting rule. SNMP, that's actually valid. So we should probably disable that. So I'm not seeing a lot of outbound stuff in here. But an outbound thing would look like you'd see an internal IP address here and an external IP address here. That's what that would look like. I'll address this one. So IPS and Untangle may be useless. If you aren't going to provide default blocks, then what use is it? I guess it's up to you. Your decision about what to block. Emerging threats, they don't also recommend anything to block. So by your definition, it is also useless and is VRT. So all these IPS technologies are useless if the definition is nothing blocks by default. Our recommendation is based on the most security value that you can get while maintaining simplicity. If you disagree with that, we are giving you the tools to literally easily enable block on every single rule. It will shut down your network, but you can easily do that. It is up to you. It is your choice on how you want to configure IPS. If you don't want us to make the choice, then I would not recommend using IPS. It is ultimately, by its nature, a very high maintenance security technology. All right, I'm going to move on. I think I covered everything. Let me make sure. I'm going to actually cover real quick some of the behind the scenes stuff. We did switch to SirKat. We used to use Snort. SirKat has a couple really nice advantages. It's more highly threaded, meaning essentially on machines with more than one core, it has better performance and lower latency and scan things quicker. It can use more memory. In fact, if you read a lot, evidently most people claim that SirKat uses a lot more memory, but in our testing, it actually uses about half on general. Again, you can monitor this yourself by going back here to, let me switch back to the apps tab and looking at the memory usage. So in our experience, it actually uses quite a bit less than Snort was using, which is a good thing, especially for users that have 2 or 3 or 4 gigs of memory on the server. And it also has some really nice features behind the scenes that you get the benefit of just because it works a little bit better than Snort and it's better packaged and so on. I will say a word of caution for your power users that go in here and turn on, it's now really easy to turn on block for rules en masse. I will give this as a warning. That means when you're troubleshooting something on the network, I would go in and disable IPS first thing just to make sure if you've turned on block for a lot of things. If you disable IPS for a few minutes to test to verify that's not the source of the issue, I would add that into your normal troubleshooting process, which may not have been there before, because before you didn't have as many rules set to block. All right, moving on. Zero-touch provisioning. Zero-touch provisioning is essentially allows you to easily install Untangle devices at your customer or at sites when you're not necessarily there and configure them very quickly. So if you're an MSP or any kind of IT administrator for multiple organizations, or you just have a lot of branch offices and you want to make deployment of those easy, you can use zero-touch provisioning. So I'm going to log into Command Center because this is mostly a Command Center feature. I'm going to show how you would go about setting up zero-touch provisioning. So I'm going to log into Command Center. Again, all of you can do this with your Untangle accounts today. I want to manage that one. And I don't actually have a lot of servers on this account, but I can still show you the basics of how to set up zero-touch. So as I said, not a lot of servers here, just, well, 4, but only 2 are online, one of which is the demo server, demo.untangle.com. So if I go to appliances, I can see those servers. The red ones are not online. So the way to set up zero-touch provisioning is you go to policies. And I'm not going to go too much into policies because we have other Command Center webinars for that, but policies is the way you go about pushing settings to devices en masse. So in the case that we just described, it'd be pushing my IPS rule set, my new IPS rule set to all 100 of my boxes. And then I want to change it again, but I don't want to change it in 100 places. So I want to change it in one, and then I want to push those changes to those 100 devices. So this is where you manage all that stuff. Under here is what's called template configuration. So templates are essentially the idea that you have a master server that has a kind of de facto configuration. And you can create those by clicking on, I want to create a template based on this server's configuration. So I've got a new install that I just installed 14.1, it's just running in VMware. But I want to use it, I've configured it, I've installed some apps, I've set them up the way I want it. I've configured my intrusion prevention rule set and configured my web filtering policies. And as step 2 of creating this master template, there's a new option called sync all new appliances. What this basically means is this is, quote, the master image or master template for new appliances. So I actually I don't want to push this to any other servers. They're not online right now anyway, but this is where you would choose to push that template to other servers. I don't want to do that right now. I just want to sync new appliances. Click next, create template. Create successfully. So now I'll see, here's my template. It was based on this appliance. and you'll see here, sync new appliances, all new appliances true. So then if I go to my appliances page, and before let's say I order a U150 and I'm shipping it to a customer, a U25X or something really small, I've got a bunch of branch offices. Before I ship them out to the actual branch, I would type in the serial number here of that appliance and add it to my account. So basically what that means is now I know that this is my appliance, and then I'm going to tell the customer, literally plug in the external to the internet, plug in the internal to the switch, and turn it on, and don't touch it. What it's going to do is get online, and now assuming you've got DHCP, which is of course true most of the time, it's going to get DHCP, it's going to talk to the internet, it's going to reach home to your command center, and it's going to say, I'm this serial number, do you have anything for me? And essentially what you're going to see locally, if you had the monitor plugged in, which you don't need to have the monitor plugged in, you literally need to do nothing but plug it in, is you would see it restore the template configuration that I defined over here. And then when that's done, it would reboot. And when it comes back up, it would be entirely configured exactly as this other appliance that I had set up is. So it would have the web filtering policies. It would have the intrusion prevention rule set. All the stuff we just talked about would be configured exactly like it, except for the network settings. The reason obviously the network settings isn't pushed is because the network settings from one box are not relevant to another server. I'm going to read, there's a lot of questions. I know I'm not keeping up with questions. It looks like the team is answering most of them.
There are some questions about Command Center being free. We'll discuss it after Dirk's done with the demo. But yes, Command Center is now free for all NG Firewall Complete subscriptions. So any of your sites that have NG Firewall Complete, you can now manage them for free through Command Center. So
even a free box, you could go in here now and click on this and log into it through your Command Center, which was not the case before. This actually has a trial, so that would qualify anyway, but this is what managing I'm just logging into a specific server through Command Center, so I don't have to remember the IPs and things like that. So for those of you who haven't played around with Command Center, I would highly encourage you to do so, especially if you're managing several Untangle appliances, especially if you're managing dozens. It can make your life significantly easier. Zero-touch provisioning cannot be used with your own hardware. I mean, you can easily, push the templates to your own hardware, but since your own hardware doesn't have the serial number in it, there's no way that we can identify it. A new box comes online, it's not linked to your account yet. There's nothing unique about your appliance that we can use to say, hey, that's appliance owned by D. Morris at Untangle.com, and we need to push this template. So definitionally, it's kind of like, hey, you need to set up the setup wizard and link it to your account. But then once you do that, you can go in and use template configuration like normal. It's just if you want true zero touch, that's all driven off the serial number of the appliance, which is how we identify it and properly send down the image. All right, so moving on. Thank you all for the questions. I think we're covering them. Most of the team is covering them. There's a new certificate management process. I'll show this briefly. Certificate management can be a real pain. We tried to make it easier. So if you go under certificates and administration now, the way we've done this part down here, which manages the server certificate, is hopefully a little bit easier. So this one actually already has a cert that we've uploaded from a third party. But let's say we wanted to upload a new server certificate. Essentially, the way certs come from providers, if I went and bought one from VeriSign or Thoughty or whatever, they come from those providers in all sorts of different fashions. So here, if you just have the text version, you can copy paste literally the server certificate and the certificate key and the optional intermediate certificates. Sometimes they have these, sometimes they don't. Or you can just choose to import the file. And when you do that, you click upload certificate, and then you close this, and then you would say, I want to use this certificate for HTTPS, for example, and then you hit save. So we've tried to make this a little bit easier. Same for process if you're if you create a certificate signing request right here, which basically CSR is something you would go to a provider with saying, I've got a request, please give me this certificate. And it makes it easy because it provides all the information for them. You give them that, they give you back a signed certificate essentially, and then you can go in here and import it the same way, or you can import it from a file, whichever one's easier. So hopefully this will be a little bit easier to manage. And there's a ton of other, I won't go into all the other changes. We did add the nice change that a lot of people asked for. There was a lot of people asking for, just improving the sorting and things like that. Oh, that's not on. You can sort the information here now. And long list, what's a good example is application control or applications. You can now, there's now a filter search box, Adobe. So, that'll easily allow you to locate settings. This is a little tricky because if you then check this and hit save, you obviously don't want to save just these 5 signatures and have all the other ones vanish. So that's why it wasn't trivial to get that working, but it works exactly as you expect. So you can go in here and type BitTorrent. It will find your signatures, make it a little easier. And it searches all the fields, right? So I searched for BitTorrent, NYAA-Tor showed up, which is a special version, I guess, or it's a BitTorrent website, because BitTorrent was in the description. The same applies for web filter categories. If you want to go in web filter categories and type, things to help you find anywhere where we have large lists that are especially fixed, not rules, in other words. You can go in here, repo, file repositories, malware. As you can see, those are both turned on. This is something that we'd recommend you block by default as a good example. You have a very low false positive rate, very high value, almost no maintenance. That's why we set this to block. It's a very safe thing to do, and it's providing a lot of value, and it's providing almost zero headaches. It's very rare that we get false positives there. So that's an example of something that's a little bit different than IPS, for example.
There's some questions about if you've never used Command Center, how can I get started? We do have some YouTube videos on Command Center, as well as some knowledge-based articles on our support website that may help you get started, just to kind of understand how that works and how you can push policies and tests without destroying your network. So that would kind of be the best scenario if you're not familiar with Command Center.
Yeah, take a whole webinar in and of itself to show all the functionality of Command Center, but it basically just helps you manage all your Untangle servers, and it's all done from untangle.com/CMD. You can log in with your account and see all your servers. A dashboard, manage individual appliances, see hosts on your network. This is basically an aggregated view of all your hosts across all your networks. Push policies, push individual settings. I want to, push my web filtering settings, for example, and things like that. All right, it looks like the team has answered most of the questions. Hopefully I covered all the stuff. There's a lot of unrelated questions that we just don't have time to get into. Why do we need a server certificate? I will address that one because it's a very common question. You don't really. This server does not have a valid cert. So when I go to it, it says dash up here. And if I had already accepted the cert, but if I didn't, I would get a warning saying, oh, this doesn't look legitimate. Because my browser has a root certificate authority store where it has a bunch of certificate authorities that it trusts. And this cert is not signed by one that it trusts. So it's not valid. In other words, you get this red. If you don't mind this, it's not the end of the world. There are some cases where your end users actually connect to Untangle, like if you have anti-spam and everybody's logging in their quarantine, where it's very useful to have a certificate. That way you don't have to explain to everybody, hey, you're going to get this warning over and over and over again. So there are some cases. Maybe you have a captive portal and you're doing some, you're using the host name, which takes a little bit of configuration, and you don't want the extra warning when somebody's logging into the captive portal. You're still going to get a warning when they go to the HTTPS site because obviously your Untangle is not Yahoo or Google or whatever. But it does eliminate the warning that when you're connecting to an Untangle HTTPS server. So that's why you would want a cert. You don't need one. You don't gain anything when you have a valid one. It just is going to show you one less warning when connecting the HTTPS to your Untangle server. And all that's is if you're managing it through Command Center, it doesn't really matter because you're going to go through our infrastructure and through a SSL tunnel that's created outbound, so it doesn't even affect you. Well, a lot of questions about Command Center. All right, I think we should probably move on, just in the interest of time. Let me switch back real quick to PowerPoint. And Shannon, did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, we kind of briefly mentioned this already, but Command Center is now free, included no additional costs for all NG Firewall complete packages. So this is great for anyone, like Dirk mentioned, MSPs, partners, or companies with many multiple branch offices, or if you're a school with many different campuses. This will really ease your management of all of those networks without having to physically be on site. So this allows you to log in remotely if there's a problem that comes up, or push policies and stuff remotely without having to physically be at the site. So we added this as a benefit for NG Firewall Complete, and we hope everyone finds it very useful. Whether you're a partner or an IT admin, trying to manage multiple locations. And we just got a whole bunch of questions coming in.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Oh, the question about what's now free in Command Center. Essentially, you can remote access your servers, whether they have a complete package or not. So if you're one of these mixed shops and you install a free version at your tiny little sites that won't pay you a dime, and then you have your complete package on your larger sites, that's totally fine. Now you can log in and manage the free sites through your Command Center as well. That's the change. I was trying to show it, but oh, that's right, I already closed it. Basically under this page. So you can click on free and you could still remote access servers, even if they don't have complete package.
All right, did you want to answer any more questions, Dirk?
Are there plans for Let's Encrypt? It's something we're looking at. It's a little tricky for us because Untangle's not a public web server in most scenarios. So it's not like Let's Encrypt, you can easily verify your site by putting a little token on your site. But Untangle often does not have a publicly addressable domain name. And sometimes it doesn't even have a public IP, actually quite often. So it's not quite as useful as you would think in a firewall context as, say, a typical website. You can still do it. It just takes a little work. But we haven't really figured out how to do it and make it seamless. But we're looking at it. All right, I think that's probably good.
I think we just have one or two more slides.
We'll
stay on just to understand. There was some questions about Untangle's availability for Azure. We're currently working on that. Currently, right now, Untangle is only available in AWS, but look in the future for Azure support as well. This is just a promotion that we have going on for anyone who is looking at Untangle or currently has an Untangle subscription or appliance. We are offering kind of an upgrade program. So if you've outgrown your license or your hardware is older, we offer some special pricing if you decide to upgrade that. So contact your sales rep or email us at sales@untangle.com, and we'll be happy to share that special pricing with you and get you the best deal possible. Let's see. I think that's about it. So last slide.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's just some video resources. As mentioned, this webinar was recorded, so it'll be posted on the Untangle YouTube channel within 24 hours after this has ended. As Dirk mentioned earlier, upgrades are being rolled out. If you want a faster upgrade, you don't want to wait for the automatic upgrade, you can email your UID to support@untangle.com to get that upgrade immediately. I think we'll just stay on for a few more minutes just to see if there's any other questions, but it looks like that's about it.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time and joining us. If you do play around with IPS, we're going to keep working on this. So if you have, when you get the upgrade, you play around with it a little bit and say, I'd really like to see this, or I'd really like to see that, or this is very difficult for me, jump on the forums or go to feedback.untangle.com. There's also actually a new, where is it? There's a little idea thing up here. Suggest an idea. You can click on that and you can actually submit your own ideas right here. Add your suggestion, or you can vote on other ones. So all sorts of ways to provide feedback. So if you get a chance to play around with the new stuff, please give us your feedback. We're going to keep working on IPS because we got a lot done, but we have a couple more things we want to do still. So if you got ideas, you got feedback, please let us hear it, positive or negative. We'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thanks, Dirk, and thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.